I need fuel, ranting fuel, but I don't have any, so I'm just going to have to kind of fly it solo. What the fuck that meant. Um, moving forward, the topic at hand, the Beatles, Peter Jackson, Get Back, Now and Then. Let's talk about it today on the no, it's just me, just Luke. RazorwireReviews, not the Multimedia Chronicles, but yes, ranting fuel. If you get that reference, is something I probably should have stocked up on before I started this video, but it was time. It really was time to talk about this and dive into this loaded topic for me. I should have made this 2 years ago, but I was too mad to make it 2 years ago, and I would have almost come across unhinged, I think. But in this video, I'm going to discuss my still simmering, burning, yeah, not simmering, burning, my still burning anger at what Peter Jackson did with the Beatles documentary Get Back. So, I'll give you my background. I'm not a Beatles fan. Well, maybe I am now. Maybe I'm a light Beatles fan. But going into this documentary, Get Back, Peter Jackson is producing this documentary series. I think it morphed a few times between what he was going to do with it, and it was okay. It's going to be a feature-length movie, then it's going to be a mini-series. It's going to be on Disney Plus, and it's going to be about the sessions in the late 60s. Was it 1969, I believe? I haven't seen it in 2 years, so I'm a little fuzzy on some of those like finer details. But it was the recording sessions for one of their last albums, Let It Be. I believe they did Abbey Road after that, and that was the end, right? So again, my lore on the Beatles isn't really even up to scratch, but I was intrigued enough, and I'm a big fan of John Lennon. I've always loved his work. It's very raw and biting and heartfelt and kind of personal, raw-edged. You know, the his first solo album, Plastic Ono, is the band. The band was Plastic. Is it Plastic Ono Band? Damn, that's like one of my favorite albums ever. I should know, but I think it's like that's the name of the band that he was releasing it under, but it's the same. The album title is the same as the band, Plastic Ono Band. I'm pretty sure, but that album I can listen to from start to finish. You know, there's so many great songs on that. You know, Working Class Hero, Remember, all of them, all of the songs are just great, and I think it's one of the rawest expressions musically that I've heard. I love that album so much. I think it came out in 1971, something like that, early 70s, not long after he left the Beatles and the band had disbanded. So I've always loved John Lennon and his work and some of his later stuff as well. Like Mind Games is a great song. You know, Imagine is a little bit dreary for me. It's not quite as interesting, but I do really enjoy John Lennon's stuff. Beautiful Boy is an incredible song. Watching the Wheels, the demo version is superior in my eyes and my ears, and I love that song. So I've always loved John Lennon. Not always. People say that. Not always, but you know, for a long time I've loved John Lennon. So I was like, well, yeah, I'd like to see this Beatles documentary. You know, and then when I heard that it was like going to be 6-7 hours long, that's what piqued my interest. Like, okay, this is not just a normal documentary. This is something special. This is going to be an experience. This is going to be us sitting in the studio with these guys for hours on end and really seeing a process of probably the most famous band that's ever existed. You know, that's kind of a monumental piece of pop culture history, I think. And so there was all this footage that was used for the original Let It Be film. I think the film was just called Let It Be, and it was about the production of this album and the kind of fractured state of the band at that time. Peter Jackson had access to all this footage, and he wanted to direct a documentary that would maybe change the narrative a little bit and kind of show a lighter side to the band and not be this kind of sensationalist film that's looking for all the bits where they're at each other's throats. So I was really excited about this, and then the first kind of material started releasing on YouTube, and I was watching, wow, this looks incredible, and is this like on 240p or something? Like, is the quality not, you know, maybe it hasn't, you know, finished processing on YouTube's end or whatever? And then I started looking a bit deeper and people talking about this, and it's like, oh no, this, like, there's something wrong with the footage. So what Peter Jackson did, and I'm no expert, I'll always say this, but I think I have a fairly decent knowledge on how these things work. Again, decent, not expert. and who knows what exactly their process was, but it's absolutely abundantly clear, and they've talked about this, it's no secret, that the footage in the Get Back documentary series, there's three feature-length installments, ultimately, was upscaled and remastered using AI technology. So a computer kind of takes the image and kind of uses an algorithm to figure out what this would look like in higher quality, and then bumps it up, which in theory sounds amazing, right? Computers, like it's the future, right? Only the thing is, what it does is it removes most of the detail, and what you get is almost like an impressionistic, painting in motion, which is sickly to look at. And I just thought, well, it must be the compression of YouTube that's making this look terrible. And it was a bit of a hot button issue. And I actually posted this on Twitter. This is a comparison I made between the trailer for the Disney Plus I think it's a Disney Plus YouTube channel, and a shot from the same piece of footage from the earlier Let It Be recordings. I think in that early documentary, I think there was even some stuff in the 90s when they did the Anthology Project, I think it was called. Again, no expert, but that we've seen footage from that period before, those recording sessions in like this warehouse setup, and then they went to a studio, and so you can see this comparison. And the original, you see John Lennon's face. It's grainy, but that's where the detail comes from. And then the Disney Plus version, the Peter Jackson kind of run through on the image, is ghoulish. It's kind of smeared out. He looks waxy. He looks digital. And the detail has been scrubbed away. And you have, again, just like, it feels cartoonish. And digital noise reduction has been around for a long time, and that's something that companies have used to wipe away grain from film restoration projects, which again is something I hate. You get some people who say, "Oh man, the Blu-ray looked really grainy," and it's like, yeah, that's where the film comes from. Physical film, little bits of grain, and that's what makes the image. And so the grain is essential to the detail that was captured originally. These days, obviously digital, it's pixels, and so you don't have grain, you don't have that issue. And you actually find a lot of films, big films now, they add artificial grain, which is kind of hilarious to me. But I was just reading a review of the new Mission Impossible 4K Blu-ray, and they said that you can tell an artificial layer of grain has been placed over it to make it look filmic, because they're not shooting on film, they're shooting on digital. Anyway, but this is not just digital noise reduction, and to me it looks like they've taken this original footage and they've used digital noise reduction to kind of take away all the grain, and then they've used that as the base to AI upscale everything to 4K. And the original footage was 16mm film, which is not the highest quality source. Traditional movies, again, I'm saying this in case someone's watching this and isn't aware of some of these things. Traditional movies mostly were shot on 35mm film, which is much higher quality than 16mm, and then obviously 8mm. 8mm is like kind of stuff people would kind of shoot home movies on. But the most of the footage in this, all those sessions they recorded were shot in 16mm. They weren't sure what they were filming. When they were making this project, they didn't know whether it was going to be building up to a big concert in like a big extravagant kind of outdoor location. They weren't sure yet, and so they were filming, but they weren't coughing up the real money for 35mm until the very end of the project, when they played Live on the Roof, which is the famous rooftop Beatles final performance together, live, so to speak. So 60mm footage is not going to look the best, but I've seen Blu-rays that are from 60mm sources, and they look fantastic, and they're grainy, but the detail is there, and it feels authentic in the way that it was filmed and shot at the time. But to take a 13mm image and to scan it in, and then remove the detail, take the grain out, and then bump it up to 4K resolution, and not only that kind of desecration to the image, and I use that term relatively, it feels weird to I mean, I would say that what Peter Jackson has done and his team has done with the footage for the Get Back documentary series is an abomination. I believe that's not just me exaggerating, it's a desecration to that footage, which I think is so hugely culturally significant. And I feel like they fucked with it in a way that is just, it's disgusting. Like, it's just, it's boys with their toys. It's like, well, this will be great. We can just bump it up to 4K and blow it up, and the AI makes it look fantastic, and it doesn't. It makes it look like dog shit. It really does, and I fucking hate it. I really do. It's just, and again, so I'm using that relatively because there's a lot of shit going on in the world right now. But in terms of the thing I'm passionate about, movies, physical media, films presented on disc and so on, in that arena, I find it disgusting. In that arena, I find it a desecration to that original footage. And I think that's the thing, right? Because what makes this whole thing even more enraging to me is it's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. Again, going in not being a Beatles fan, Get Back is editorially a masterpiece. I have to give them so much credit because not only is it all this footage, but it's actually tinkering with audio. And they used AI technology to separate the voices of the Beatles and their instruments, to take them into separate tracks and then be able to get clearer audio, get clearer, pull in things that are more interesting, pull down things that are kind of muddying the audio.
Doing this thing so that there's no overdubs or you can't get out of it is much better, really.
So we can take these mono tracks and split off all the instruments. We can just hear the vocals, the guitars. You see Ringo thumping the drums in the background, and you don't hear the drums at all. That allows us to remix it really cleanly.
And then also they use bits of audio with correlating video footage that doesn't match. And some people found that really offensive. I didn't. I think that is a way you can use AI, because a lot of this stuff was audio with no visual. So they would use kind of approximate footage to kind of just make it feel like a full visual cinematic experience in that sense, with the AI kind of separated voice tracks. Which, I can tell when they've shown examples of this, that, and we'll get to that at the second half of this video, by the way, is going to be my thoughts on Now and Then, the new the last Beatles song that just got released like yesterday. That's the way you can hear the AI separation of the elements of the thing, but it's still kind of pieces of the truth in there. But with the video side of it, it just isn't there yet, and it probably will get there at some point, but it just, and I know that Peter Jackson did this with his World War I documentary. I feel like that's far enough removed that it's almost permissible to me. I haven't seen it, so I can't judge. Maybe I'll watch it and I'll feel exactly the same and think that it's horrible. But, to colorize this old footage from World War I, to get voice actors to do the voices over the silent footage to kind of make you feel like you're watching this stuff from World War I, and it feels more alive and current, and kind of really opens your eyes to know this wasn't just some black and white dream. This really happened. I think that's a really interesting way to approach it. And so, in theory, I kind of support what he did with the AI technology and the upscaling with that old footage. Again, I haven't seen it. I've seen a trailer, but it's one film. I still want to watch it, and I will get around to it. But that's a way of doing it that I think is worthwhile, because it's this old kind of silent footage that otherwise maybe might be disinteresting to some modern audiences, and so that might be a really great historical tool to kind of to show people how these things, or at least kind of a shadow or an impression of what that was like, to kind of augment the truth a little bit with colorization and some of the audio elements that they used in there. But with the Beatles, we've seen the Beatles, on film, from way earlier than the Get Back documentary. We've seen them, when they had the kind of the bob haircuts and all that stuff, the early Beatlemania. We've seen interviews with them and stuff. It's the TV appearances. So it's not this Get Back footage. It's just like this. We've never seen it before. We've never seen the Beatles kind of talking to each other, and so it's you can kind of tinker with it because there's no precedent set, but there is a precedent set, And there's a moment in one of the three films where, and to me it is kind of a trilogy of documentaries that kind of cover this whole period. But in one of them, they're talking about this trip they made to India, I believe, and they show home video footage. And that's been scanned in properly, and that hasn't been tinkered with. And it just shines such a light on how great this footage can look, and how bad it looks with everything else that they've done. Now, this doesn't just, look, if you look at it up close on the big screen TV, it looks a little bit off. Like, in motion, it's sickening at times. I mean, I literally felt disassociated at times from what I was watching and listening, because they look CGI. They look like it actually even reminded me of Forrest Gump when you see John Lennon on like a TV interview, and the mouth is moving differently, and to kind of accommodate that Forrest Gump is in this scene now, which was very early digital technology in the in the early to mid 90s, but it felt like that at times because the hair would look smeary and like there was stuff like wobbling, and I wonder if they even went through every frame and adjusted the AI settings, or if they just applied a flat filter to it. I don't know, but I feel like the amount of time they put into it, they would have taken the care to do that. Maybe they did, but even then it just it doesn't show because it's it's so weird. And you look at that footage, and there was a lot of it in the new documentary about the last Beatles song, Now and Then, and I'm like, ugh, because it's this great 12-minute documentary that just very briefly tells you how the final Beatles song came together, this old demo that John Lennon had recorded in 1976, I think 1977, in New York, and the surviving Beatles, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and Paul McCartney, in the early 90s, they wanted to add to it and kind of release it as a Beatles song perhaps, but they couldn't quite get there with the muddy recording that was left on just a tape cassette. And so now in 2022, with George Harrison gone also, they've gone back to it and they've reworked it, and they've used the AI technology that Peter Jackson used on Get Back to pull John Lennon's voice out of that track, to separate the piano, and to really have something fuller sounding, and that's the basis of this final Beatles song.
They said, "This is the sound of John's voice." A few seconds later, or however long it took, and there it was, John's voice, crystal clear.
I know it's true. It's all because of you.
So this mini documentary shows you all the process, all the steps that were taken over the years, and kind of the story of it, and it intercuts with footage from Get Back, and you see and it uses footage from all eras of the Beatles, and all the footage looks phenomenal except for the Get Back stuff, and it really just shines a light on how terrible it looks. It's smoothed out, waxy bullshit, and it's terrible. I would love to own it, but I feel like spending money on the Blu-ray would just be going against my principles up to a point. And and it's not even the tinkering of the image with the DNR, the AI upscaling. It's the aspect ratio. It's been cropped to widescreen because of course it has, because why would anyone want to watch anything with black bars on the left and right? It's terrible. It really is, because you just have you have this generation who they want everything to fill the screen, and you're losing information that way. You're losing bits of the image, and so it's just a further removing of what that original footage was. And there's another thing that really rubs me the wrong way. They released a kind of restoration feature to show how beaten up and almost unusable the footage was, and they cleaned it up and used this amazing new technology to make it feel like it was recorded yesterday. It doesn't. It just looks like it's been run through a computer. But this restoration feature is disingenuous, in my opinion, because they have this, here's the original footage, and it's like all washed out, you can barely see it, all crackly and stuff, and then here's the bright, new, pristine, colourful, beautiful, AI abomination. But that kind of before image, that I feel like that was augmented, because you can see that stuff elsewhere, and you can see it and it looks good. And the DVD stuff, the standard definition footage of that, those sessions look better than the 4K on Disney Plus. Now, streaming on 4K, and the bit rate is a whole other issue and stuff, but, I just think it's like, we need to have it be like widescreen 4K Ultra HD, and it's like, guys, it's like 16mm footage. If you scanned that in and just restored it properly, maybe it was cheaper to do it with a computer with AI, and not have to kind of manually. I mean, they use computer tools anyway to restore this stuff, but I don't know whether just doing this AI, process was cheaper than actually going in frame by frame, or shot by shot, or whatever the case may be, because there was a lot of footage. Was a cheaper way of doing it. Maybe it was just insurmountably expensive to restore everything the proper way. But and I've listened to Peter Jackson. he did an interview on like a Beatles fan podcast. Fair play to him. I love that he went on that, and he said like I love you guys. I've listened to, but it's not a very big podcast from what I remember. And he joined their YouTube channel and talked to them for like 3+ hours, and it was interesting. And I do respect what he did with the film, but I just completely and utterly disagree with what he did with the visuals there. And I just feel like he's lost his way gradually with the visual side of filmmaking, which feels harsh to say, but I felt quite vindicated when I saw an interview of Viggo Mortensen, who plays Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings movies, and he said that the first Lord of the Rings film was very magical and a very special film, and that the following films, Two Towers and Return of the King, felt like they lost something with overblown visual effects, right? And then he said that, and with the Hobbit movies, it's that to the nth degree, which is pretty harsh, but I agree with it. I think the Hobbit movies, I do love them. There's a lot to love about them. I think, he still had the touch, but, and the behind the scenes in the Hobbit films are incredible. Like, and then I really appreciate that he let it hang out there. And he said there's a bit in those Hobbit documentaries where he's just holding his head in his hand saying, I don't know what I'm doing. This has got away from me, and the fact that he allowed that to happen. I have a lot of respect for Peter Jackson. I just really strongly disagree with every choice he made with the visuals in this documentary that it is a landmark, but it should have been a fucking towering pillar of cinema. It should have been one of the most important pieces of filmmaking ever, and that sounds dramatic, but I truly believe it, because what you get in this documentary series is unbelievable. There's footage of McCartney just on his bass or on a guitar, and he's just kind of thrumming away, and he's beating at it, and the song "Get Back" just comes out of it, and it's not like it arrives fully formed, but you feel it just bursting out of him like it's been caged up, and he's just found a way to kind of crack the side of the cage open, and it ekes out a little bit. Oh, there's something there, like, and it's like goosebumps, And I will say, because all of the content in this documentary, like what is contained within it, not that it's a piece of content, well, it still is, but that's a whole other conversation and controversy. But it's so good. It's just so incredible that I did kind of just get used to it, because to sit there and hate watch it would be pointless, right? And I thought I'd give it a go. I wasn't committed to watching the whole thing, but once I got an hour into it, I thought, this is just immense. It's immense. It's such a piece of work, And Peter Jackson's a piece of work for what he did to this thing. So nothing I've said has been exaggerated in my mind, but it's not a simple thing of hating it or loving it, and it's both at the same time, which makes it so frustrating to me, because the stuff that you see, the interactions between these legendary figures, that brings them down to earth. You want a cup of tea? Like just stuff like that. Oh, I watched this program the other night, last night on BBC. This is sci-fi film. Like I can't do a very good accent, but they're just little details that seem so like, inconsequential, like non sequiturs, and like just these little things that Peter Jackson kept in there that I thought were so beautiful. These little tiny moments that, a long form documentary allows for. And that to me just made it feel less about, okay, they did this, they went there, they recorded this is them playing that song, and then they went to here, and then they did that, then they played on the rooftop, the end. You could very easily make a 90-minute, 2-hour movie of all of this footage and tell a very coherent story of them making this album and kind of put in some of the dramatic bits and stuff. But when you get like, I don't know, I can't remember the full running time off the top of my head, but it feels like each part was at least 2 hours, some of them pushing 2.5 hours. So I think it's about 6 or 7 hours long, and with that it's like hanging out with them. You get all those important bits, but you have these long stretches where it's like you feel like you're there, and it doesn't overdo that. It doesn't get I know some people thought it was tedious. It wasn't to me. It was absolutely engrossing, but I just every now and then I just remember what I was watching and just think, oh, like his face looks like a mess. There's a bit where I think Ringo Starr is smoking, or he's holding a cigarette, and the smoke is going up, and it's misreading it, and his face is wobbling, or his hair's going all. It's just like, what were they thinking? And another thing about Peter Jackson, is that the 4K discs of the Lord of the Rings, I refuse to buy them unless that 4K Lord of the Rings set goes down to about £10. I refuse to buy it. I was so excited for it, but apparently they weren't going to scan it in, and there was something about the visual effects not being kind of, I don't know, there was some kind of murky details about the source material and the basis for the 4K version of the Lord of the Rings on 4K Blu-ray. And there was kind of various kind of people thought they looked great, people thought it looked terrible, some people were in the middle. But once I saw that Peter Jackson had used AI technology on that as well to upscale stuff, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Like on a film like that, and again, I don't know all the details of like the visual effects and the actual original film negatives and how that all works and whether it would have to be kind of all redone. I don't know. But the one thing I know is that there's this one shot that I saw, and I'm sure there are many other instances across those 11, 12 hours of movie, because it's the extended versions as well. There's a shot of like it's the top of Minas Tirith looking out, and I think Gandalf is there, and there's a couple of horses or something, and Gandalf's staff, the top of it has kind of moved slightly, and I think there's a horse's ear that disappears, and you can see when you compare between the 4K and the Blu-ray that it's because the AI has kind of jumbled some of the image up and misplaced something, because it's trying to kind of catch up and kind of bring everything like, and that I just thought I couldn't believe it, and I'm sure that it's like nowhere near as noticeable, like almost an entire galaxy away from Get Back, but I just think in principle I can't believe that was the basis of it. I just don't agree with the AI upscaling until it gets to a place where it's a lot more refined. I just don't think you should be doing that with original film negatives in the realm of film, in cinema, and in the realm of this documentary like Get Back. So yeah, very complicated relationship with it. I think it's an incredible piece of work editorially, fascinating, even as someone who's not a big Beatles fan, and I think just heartwarming at times to really see the connection these guys had, and the narrative is that they were at each other's throats at this time and stuff, and you can see some of that tension, but you can also see that that they were still kind of quite chipper and getting on quite well, and even Yoko Ono didn't seem to be this kind of ugly domineering presence that she's made out to be. In fact, I was watching the Now and Then documentary with Connie last night, and there's a bit where Paul McCartney said, yeah, Yoko said she found a tape of John, Sorry. You always got to try and do it, haven't you? I like the Simon Pegg. He's like, well, Paul's up and Ringo's down here. Like, I was a bit Australian. I like the Simon Pegg thing. It's not perfect, but like the idea that the Beatles were in different parts of your mouth, which is great. Well, he's up here, up in the top here. I can't do it very well. I'm not a master impressionist, unlike Daisuke Beppu, our friend of the channel, but yeah, so where was I going with that? So I don't know. I was getting lost in impression land. Paul McCartney, he said that Yoko Ono sent him a tape of John's recordings, and Connie went, "That doesn't sound like Yoko Ono." And I'm just like, God, like, what a base like judgment on like absolutely no knowledge whatsoever that she's like this venomous kind of presence. And I'm not saying that she wasn't, but you get kind of more of a rounder look, I think, with this Get Back documentary series, and I loved seeing it. I forget the guy's name. The guy who came in to play with them on the keyboards, he was such an amazing presence that really brought life into that recording sessions, plural. So to see how these things worked and them going back to listen to it, and the way that Peter Jackson put in, like, this is like the 17th take of the song, and this is the one that appears on the album Let It Be, or whatever it happens to be. This is the take that they used for the album, or whatever. I love that kind of distinction and those kind of like things on screen. And then the rooftop sequence at the end does look like there's quite a marked difference between all the previous footage and the rooftop footage, because once they realized they're going to do this kind of impromptu concert, they brought out the big guns, the 35mm footage, and so it looks a lot better. It's still AI upscaled, but it's not as ropey and smeary and kind of distracting. It feels like the Uncanny Valley, and it's real footage that exists. Like, it's just so mind-blowing to me that this even happened. But the way that he presented the rooftop footage, where it's like it plays out in real time, and you've got like cameras on the ground speaking to people, you've got cameras inside the building at the bottom floor, and like the reception with the police trying to get in. Like, again, editorially, absolutely mind-blowing, like putting all those pieces together, running it in real time, showing the entire concert, and they played songs multiple times and showing the entire thing. beautifully put together, absolutely just immaculately edited, just airtight, incredible. And it's just great that at least that footage looks a lot better. So that's my thoughts on Get Back, And again, 2 years ago, I probably would have ranted a bit more with a bit more venom and verve, but it is what it is. And I'm glad I waited a little bit because it feels like the perfect time now because this final Beatles song came along. So let's talk about that briefly. So, Paul McCartney had said earlier in the year, this year's 2023. I'm currently recording this in November 2nd, 2023. No, November 3rd, I think it is. November 3rd. Paul McCartney said earlier this year, sorry, they're going to release probably the final Beatles song. He said that he was going to use AI technology to bring John Lennon back to a Beatles song, which everyone's like alarm bells, like what the fuck, and it's like no, he's using this AI technology to pull the voice out of this track and to bring it to where it's more acceptable for them to kind of bring in George Harrison's pieces from 94, 95. How Ringo Starr do the drums, Paul McCartney do like the bass and all sorts of other things and backing vocals, and then you have John Lennon at the center of this with this song that he wrote and performed in very, very raw circumstances on a piano just in his apartment. I think someone said it was recorded off a boombox, which may be a apocryphal tale. I don't know, but it sounds close to that when you listen to the original recording and all the crackling on it and stuff. But it's really a miracle what they're able to do. And this 12-minute documentary about the making of Now and Then, I found incredibly moving, rattling even, like it really shook me because it shows you the true power of music. And they talk about they're trying to work on this song and it wasn't quite right, and then George died, and then 25 years later almost, and now they have a chance to pull this song, this vocal from this song and have just John's voice, and pulls and there it was, crystal clear, and then the way it's just this panning shot up over a mixing desk, and you just hear the raw, isolated vocal of John Lennon, echoing through, 43 years of time. It was incredibly moving. It really choked me up. And that these guys were able to then go back and kind of, do this weird kind of time travel, this artistic time travel is really something. It's a really cool thing. I really do support it. I think it's just a nice kind of tribute to John Lennon, and in the spirit of George Harrison, who tried to kind of pull that thing together and play some guitar on it and stuff, and even going so far as Paul McCartney trying to get a kind of slide guitar solo in the style of George Harrison as a tribute to him. So it's kind of it's this rounding off of this legacy, this incredible legacy of this band that burned very brightly very vividly for a short period of time. And then it just became, when the Beatles going to get back for however many years it was, not that many really, because John was sadly murdered, about 10 years afterwards. So that kind of put the nail in that coffin of, that can never happen again. And they weren't going to do Beatles as a three-piece, right? And so that's the often asked question is, what would have happened if John had survived, and would they have got back together again, all this kind of stuff. But this is just a nice kind of way to tip the hat to John, I think, and to George, and for Paul and Ringo to kind of just have a bit of fun. It feels a bit loose as well. The music video just got released today, and that's kind of a fun kind of time warpy kind of thing that's got a bit of humor in it and stuff. Peter Jackson directed that. So what Peter Jackson has done for the Beatles, I'm glad that Get Back exists. I'd rather have seen it than not. I think, it was so great to see that, even as someone who's not really a big fan. People who are big fans and don't care about the visual stuff must have been an absolute fucking nirvana, like absolute paradise, seeing all that stuff and really just getting to live with them for 5, 6, 7 hours. But for me, it was a big hang up. But would I watch it again? I think I would. But, knowing what I know, it's just such a shame. It's such a shame. But the song, let's just talk about that briefly before I round this up. I think it's rather beautiful. I liked it at first, and it really grew on me, and I've been listening to it again and again, and I just love what they did. It's really nice. It reminds me a bit of The Endless River, which is a Pink Floyd album from 2014, where the two surviving members of the band, as it was after Roger Waters left, so Nick Mason, David Gilmour, they came out with The Endless River, which was an almost entire album of instrumental music that they'd worked on with their former bandmate Richard Wright, the keyboard, pianist who played with Pink Floyd for the entirety of Pink Floyd's career, and he passed away in 2008. So they decided to do something with this all this stuff they'd recorded in the 90s while they were working on the Division Bell, and all that stuff has all this music that Richard Wright had written on the keyboards and stuff. And so they brought that back to life, and they played new music over it. And so it's kind of this album-long tribute to kind of Richard Wright, and to kind of round off their legacy in a way. Although, of course, Pink Floyd kind of put out one more song last year, I think it was, with Hey Hey Rise Up. So it's interesting to see these older bands kind of come back and kind of maybe put an extra button on things. But specifically, there's a piece on the Endless River called Autumn '68, which is a recording of Richard Wright playing on the organ at the Royal Albert Hall in the late 60s. And it's this haunting melody, this haunting sequence of notes. I'm not very musical, on the organ. And they recorded it, I guess, just randomly, and brought it back for the Endless River. And then David Gilmour plays his guitar in response to the organ. And it's very subtle. There's not even very many notes that he plays on the guitar, but he echoes along with it. And that kind of, like 60s, like 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, this 45-year kind of time travel of this guy that he loved. They loved each other, Richard Wright and David Gilmour. They had such a strong friendship, and they loved each other, and they worked together beautifully right from the beginning. And you have that stuff that they would, the kind of the dueling, and kind of harmonizing vocals of echoes, right from that beginning, and that's, anyways, that's whole, I'm getting to Pink Floyd stuff and all the lore and the history, but to have, them kind of, posthumously kind of create that kind of duet over time was, and Paul McCartney had been touring, I think this year and last year maybe, and he was doing, what's the song, I Got a Feeling, and so he'd play half the song, and then he'd turn around to the screen, and John Lennon would appear from the rooftop concert, and he would sing the next kind of part of the verse of the song. And so it's kind of like, this kind of musical time travel between life and death, I think, is something that's really kind of interesting and cool. And you get all the people saying, is it morally right? Would that person want to do it? And you can never really truly know the answer. But with Now and Then, this final Beatles song, all the families were involved and approved and found it very touching. And I think it's a really nice song. It's nice to hear John Lennon's. I'm sure this is a track that's been bootlegged and passed around for decades, but to have it in this kind of full form with all the guys appearing on it is really, really cool. And that documentary was a really great 12-minute encapsulation of the production of it and what it means. And so, yeah, it's for Beatles fans, it must be pretty good the past couple of years. But it's intrigued me to go and check out more of them for sure. But ultimately, I just find myself in a state of resentment towards the whole Get Back thing. Maybe that'll soften over time, but not anytime soon. And I think I've been fair in this video of giving heavy praise and heavy criticism. And if I ever met Peter Jackson and the topic came up, I would say it to his face. I would. It wouldn't be comfortable to say it, but if I was in a position where, it was expected of me to bring it up, then I would. Not that will ever happen. One, I'd never meet him. Two, it would never come up. But, if in that position, hypothetically, it's not something I would shy away from, because I do strongly disagree with it. And it is what it is, but it's still a treasure in its own right, and I'm glad that it exists rather than it not. And man, if only there'd been a way to kind of give the fans both, have the full aspect ratio with no AI tinkering, or the fancy 4K, fake 4K, smeared plastic, shitty CGI, uncanny valley, digital Beatle version, Anyway, but I really did enjoy the poignant final song Now and Then, and the little documentary that came along with it. And that song really happens because of Peter Jackson. So again, I'm glad that all this kind of stuff did happen rather than it didn't. And that's my thoughts, and I'm sticking to them. Leave your thoughts down below, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.